من آهنگ کوثر هستم در واشنگتن دی سی. با برنامه دیگر از مجموعه آبانگان با شما خواهم بود تا با هم درباره آب حرف بزنیم. مسعود پزشکیان رئیس جمهوری اسلامی اعلام کرد که بایستی پایتخت جاش عوض بشه و به حاشیه خلیج فارس بره.
من اون اوایل خدمت آقا رسیدم، گفتم ما باید پایتختمون عوض کنیم بریم تهران. یه عده از این آدما شروع کردن تو این رسانه ها حالا مسخره کردن، تحلیل کردن، نمیدونم هنوز من این اطلاعات امروز رو نداشتم که الان اساتید دانشگاه تهران و نمیدونم علامه و مدرس و مشهد و اومدن گزارش میدن وضعیت آب تهران رو. وحشتناکه.
کمبود آب باعث شده که جمهوری اسلامی به این نتیجه برسه که بایستی پایتخت ایران رو جاشو عوض کرد. پایتخت ایران بخش قابل توجهی از آب شرب کشور رو مصرف میکنه. یادمون باشه که آب مانند یک آهنربا میمونه، یک آهنربای جمعیتی، و وجود آب باعث خواهد شد که بسیاری از مردمانی که از کم آبی رنج میبرند به سمت جای پر آب مهاجرت بکنند. در گذار زمان وقتی نگاه بکنیم بسیاری از شهرها و بناهای تمدنی در کنار رودخانه‌ها یا در محل خروج آب زیرزمینی در حقیقت ایجاد شدند. اگر عکس‌های ماهواره شب رو نگاه بکنید می‌بینید که چراغ‌ها در جای روشن هستند که آب وجود داره، یعنی آبادی با آب مترادفه. حالا در نظر بگیرید که وقتی منابع آب از بین بره آبادی‌ها بی آب، بی آبان و نابود میشن.
چگونه یک دریاچه را نابود کنیم؟ اول کارو میسپاریم به بیمغزداران محترمی که موجودی مخشون دقیقاً مساوی با موجودی آب یک آفتابه سوراخه، صفر صفر. بعد اینقدر سد میزنیم اطراف دریاچه که یه قطره آب بی اجازه وارد دریاچه نشه. وسط دریاچه هم یه پل میکاریم تا دو طرفش مسابقه تبخیر بذارن. اطراف دریاچه رو اونقدر با چاهای عمیق سوراخ میکنیم که زمین رسما شبیه غربال مامان بزرگ بشه. آب زیرزمینی و سطحی و خرج کشت چغندر میکنیم که مسئولین بتونن شکر زیادی بخورن. قرارگاه آفتابه. نتیجه کار میشه یه دریاچه ارومیه مرحوم که مردم باید از اونجا برای همیشه برن، یا به این دنیا یا به اون دنیا.
وقتی متوجه میشیم که فجایعی که در محیط زیست ایران اتفاق افتاده تا چند درصد، تا چه بخشش دست انسان و مدیریت دولتی بوده، به این میاندیشیم که آیا نبایستی ساختاری پاسخگو بیاد و توضیح بده چه اتفاقی افتاده و چه باید کرد؟ وجود یک کمیسیون حقیقتیاب میتونه کمک بسیار بزرگی باشه به این مسئله. وجود کسانی که میان و فساد رو بررسی میکنن و نگاه میکنن که چه اشکال‌های وجود داشته در اجرای قانون و یا نادیده گرفته شدن قانون اهمیت پیدا میکنه. جف کانجان مدیر مؤسسه یونیشکا در ایالات متحده سالهاست که داره درباره فساد در عرصه‌های بین‌المللی تحقیق میکنه و مدتی پیش بر روی مسئله فساد در حوزه آب ایران هم تحقیق کرد. گفتگویی کردم با جف در ماه‌های گذشته که بخشای از اون رو در این برنامه با هم میبینیم. از جف پرسیدم که مردم ایران چگونه باید از منظر محیط زیستی مقام‌های جمهوری اسلامی رو پاسخگو کنند که در آینده نیازی به بررسی دوباره فساد در بخش آب نداشته باشیم.
Internationally, there was not a great deal of focus on the environment until probably 1960 or 1961, at least in the West, when Rachel Carson published her now famous work called Silent Spring. That really brought the environment to the forefront and started the environmental movement. And it is now very much entrenched in the West. But what we need to do is focus on educating youth around the world about the effects of the environment. Everything that's easy, like letting water run when a child is brushing their teeth. It's not the end of the world if the child lets the water run, but if you shut the water off and say, hey, we have to protect the fish, then the child gets that instilled into their psyche, and every action that they take for the rest of their lives, they're thinking about the trees, they're thinking about the fish, and what are they really thinking about? They're thinking about our home, which is the only place that we can all live together. So whether we get along together or not, we have to treat our home with care, and we have to keep it clean. And so we need to focus on educating our youth. That is the long-term solution. The short-term solution is, of course, as you said, we must enforce the regulations that are currently there. In Iran, just like in many other places in the world, you have to do an environmental impact statement before you engage in a major project. Now, that is true in Iran, and if you're a private organization, you do have to complete the environmental impact statement. Now, I am not saying that environmental impact statement is not influenced by political contributions or other contributions that corporation may make, but the environmental impact statement is required. However, if you have a corporation that's affiliated with the IRGC or otherwise a quasi-governmental organization, they do not have to fill out the environmental impact statement. And to be perfectly honest, they just ignore it, because what they are attempting to do is build it at the lowest cost possible, using the least quality of parts that are still usable, but it's all about keeping costs down. And obviously, when you have a low cost that you're putting out for your project, but you're receiving a lot of income, there's a lot of money that's in that space that obviously goes to other elements besides the project itself. And this is where corruption pops in its ugly head.
تا زمانی که مشارکت عمومی وجود نداره، مردم چگونه میتوانند در بهتر کردن امور نقش بازی کنند؟
Sure. People are not only part of the solution, people are the only solution. There's, if the United States under President Trump comes in and removes the regime, they're not going to be focused on the rights of everyday people. They're not going to be focused on water quality. They're going to be focused on just getting security, right? Keeping the country afloat so everyone can live and go to their jobs, etc. So the only solution to this is for people to unite around a common narrative and to have courage. What do I mean by courage? Courage does not mean that you have to get out with a protest sign in the middle of the street and protest. Courage does not mean that you have to, start fires in the street. Courage can be a simple thing. Courage can be writing a letter to the appropriate officials and say, listen, I read this article, and this article outlines this type of corruption. How can we fix this? In that instance, you're not putting yourself in jeopardy, because you're asking them to do what is their job, to fix the corruption. But if it's one person that writes a letter, that's a good start. If it's 10 million people that write a letter, they're going to pay attention. And so we have to do what we can do. If you're young, you're energetic, you're full of vim and vigor, get out and start making a difference. If you want to protest, you can protest. If you want to get a group of people together and pick up litter, do that. If you're an older person, say my age, in mid-60s, write a letter or attend a public hearing. Let them know that this is of interest to you. You're not interested in changing, the government. You're interested in making sure that the environment is safe for your children, your grandchildren, and the generations that we have a duty to protect in the future.
همین چندی پیش سری زدیم به سدهایی که برداشته شده بودن از روی رودخانه قسمت در شمال کالیفرنیا. مردم ایران معتقدند که بسیاری از سدهایی که ساخته شدند قاتل رودخانه ها و منابع آبهای سطحی هستند. اگر بخوان این سدها برداشته بشه چه روندی رو بایستی طی کنند؟
So it's good that you brought up the Klamath River, because in this particular instance, you had a unified minority. You had the United States Native American population in the region that has lived there for, oh my goodness, 10,000 years or so, 20,000 years. And as a people, they remember what the rivers were like. And so, to be honest, even I as a kid remember what the rivers were like. And so what they did is they band together and they petitioned the government, and they kept the pressure up in the government year after year after year. They did not, go try and use violence. What they did is they tried to use political pressure, and eventually they were successful. The politicians finally heard their voice because they spoke with one voice. This gets back to what I was talking about earlier, is uniting the narrative. If everyone speaks with one voice, they will hear the voice. Part of what these individuals do that are, I don't like to use the word leaders, because a leader indicates that you're doing something for the people. And oftentimes that's not the case. But these politicians will divide the people in order to advance their own interests. But if the people speak with one voice, I do not care whether you're in the United States or you're in Iran, you will have an impact. So unite your voice, and then take your voice to the politicians and speak to them. And I would also like to say another really important thing about removing these dams, and the dams that have been built in Iran since 1979. There have been, I believe, over 500 dams constructed since 1979. And many of these were built during the Ahmadinejad period. And one of the problems that we have, in addition to the grievous environmental impacts that have occurred, is, again, they use substandard materials. So instead of using, for example, Portland cement, they would go to Pakistan or India and use a lesser grade cement. The problem with this is, when the engineers designed the dam, it was designed to hold this pressure based upon the type of rebar, the type of cement, etc., that they are using. If you're using a lesser grade of rebar or using a lesser grade of cement, it means that the structure has significant structural, or could have significant structural deficiencies. And so you are faced with something like we might see with the Mosul Dam in Iraq, where at any time, if there is a major flood, these dams, any of these dams, one of these dams could give way and end up killing thousands of people. And of course, it'll be a big tragedy at the time, and they'll ask for international help, and they'll ask for money from the international community. The problem is, we could have solved the problem at the get-go by eradicating, or there's no such thing as eradicating corruption, reducing corruption. And we need to go back now to those dams, evaluate them, evaluate which ones are actually useful or which ones need to be removed. We also need to test the concrete and the rebar to eliminate those that had corruption in the construction, so that we can save those thousands and thousands of people that could potentially be killed when, don't mistake, I'm not saying if, I'm saying when one of these dams gives way.
شما به عنوان کسی که با خیلی از جوامعی که قربانی فساد و ضعف‌های محیط زیستی بوده اند، با چه مشکلاتی مواجه شدید و واقعا برای رفع بسیار از این مشکلات چه باید کرد؟
one of the issues that we are facing, especially in repressive countries, is that people are not educated in corruption, or they're not educated in the environment or in water. And so the number one thing that people can do is educate themselves by taking training if it's available, getting online. YouTube is a wonderful place. Now, granted, there's a lot of stuff that's on YouTube that is not factual, but you have to do research, which means do not look at one video or two videos. Look at a consensus of videos. There are many universities or trusted individuals such as yourself that put out videos that talk about the environment, that talk specifically about the environment in Iran. Stanford University has a number of research papers that they put out that are focused on Iran. So research those. Take training classes when they're made available to you. You offer training classes in Iran. We offer training classes. There are a number of people that offer training classes about either how to deal with, how to be effective in fighting corruption, or how to be effective in protecting the environment. When our narrative is united, there's no question that we will be successful. And eventually, even if it's the last person standing, we will be successful because people will see the degradation that's happening in the world today.
در سالهای اخیر بحث قانون مگنیتسکی برای مبارزه با فساد بین‌المللی زیاد مطرح شده. آیا فکر می‌کنید می‌توان از قانون مگنیتسکی برای مبارزه با فساد در بخش آب هم استفاده کرد؟
Absolutely. So Global Magnitsky is a wonderful tool. So let's start with the post designation. So oftentimes what we have is the individuals that are going to get sanctioned under Global Magnitsky's are part of the oligarchs, right? They are, whether it's the American oligarchs or the Russian oligarchs or the Iranian oligarchs, those are the people with money. Those are the people that have the control. So they are the ones that get sanctioned. And as a consequence, if they cannot move their money internationally, or their money is threatened internationally, they are going to take great interest in resolving the issues. So Global Magnitsky has a real impact. Now, what needs to happen is individuals need to get smart in both those environmental impacts that rise to the level of a human rights violation, and those issues that are only not regulatorily allowed, or that are inappropriate but don't rise to the level of a human rights violation. Once they are educated in that by, for example, videos that you put out or that others put out, I would always check the UNDP sites, for example, or UNODC that offers videos as well. Once they understand that, we offer training, as do a number of other organizations, on how to put together the files to be able to empower civil society so that they can make their case as to why this individual or this organization should be sanctioned under Global Magnitsky. And so I would urge people to get involved in this. And what is so nice about this, you can do this 100% anonymously. You do not need to be identified in this process. Why? Because it is fact-based research. If you can provide the fact-based research, then they are going to validate your research, so it doesn't matter what your name is. What is important is that you provide fact-based research, and then they will take action, and they will begin to sanction the oligarchs that are behind this type of heinous corruption.
درسته که من دارم از این شبکه تلویزیونی با شما صحبت میکنم. درسته که از طریق شبکه‌های اجتماعی میتونید این برنامه رو باز ببینید. اما بسنده کردن به آنچه که بر شبکه‌ها می‌بینید کمکی به آینده کشور نخواهد کرد. به عمل کار برآید، نه به سخنرانی من و شما. نشستن بر روی مبل و تماشای برنامه هیچ تغییری ایجاد نمی‌کنه. آیا ما به روستاییانی که منابع آبشون از دست رفته کمک کردیم؟ آیا دانش خودمون رو بیشتر کردیم در قبال آنچه که در سرزمینمون وجود داره؟ و آیا اومدیم حتی سهمی از درآمد خودمون رو هر چند اندک بذاریم کنار برای اینکه آب بیشتری برای کودک سیستان و بلوچستانی فراهم بکنیم؟ آیا اومدیم دنبال راهکارهای پایدار برای اینکه خانه‌دار بکنیم هموطنانمون رو در حاشیه شهرها که با اومدن یک زلزله ممکنه جانشون از دست بره؟ ماها پیش در همین برنامه گزارشی که تهیه کرده بودیم از مجموعه کل ارث رو براتون به نمایش گذاشتیم. قسمت‌های از اون رو ببینید تا باز هم در برنامه بعدی یادآوری کنیم که میتوان حتی با کیسه گونی خانه‌ای پایدار درست کرد که در مقابل زمین لرزه مقاوم هست، خنک‌تر هست در تابستان‌ها و میتونه سرپناه امن باشه برای میلیون‌ها نفر. همونطوری که دیدید نادر خلیلی روشی رو ایجاد کرده که بتوان با ساده ترین امکانات در هر جایی یک سازه‌ای بنا کرد و نکته مهم این هست که مردمان هر منطقه می توانند با کمک همدیگر این سازه‌ها رو ایجاد بکنند. چرا منی که در یک نقطه بسیار مرفه تهران زندگی می کنم نیام کمک کنم به هموطنم که بی خانمان شده و براش چنین خانه‌ای درست بکنم؟ در کنار هم میتونیم موفق بشیم. بزرگترین درسی که من گرفتم از این کارگاه آموزشی کار اجتماعی بود. به امید اینکه دست به دست هم بدیم برای نجات سرزمین، برای نجات منابع طبیعی، برای اینکه فرزندانمون ایرانی داشته باشن و لزومی به مهاجرت وجود نداشته باشه. تا درود دیگر بدرود.